Good morning, all participants, our esteemed speaker, and welcome back to the Global Virtual Exchange Summit 2025, Day 2, on July 9, 2025. I am Alice, and I'm honored to be your moderator for this keynote speech this morning. As I said earlier, just in case you just come in right now, please be reminded that the summit will be recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube for viewers and participants in different time zones. So with all this in mind, why don't I tell you about our speakers for the bio? It's Professor GianMario Besana I need to look at my phone. DePaul University. Yes. Professor Besana is the Associate Provost for Global Engagement and Online Learning at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, USA. He led the creation of the Global Learning Experience, GLE program, DePaul's signature Virtual Exchange COIL initiative, and of the Global Conversation Series, another approach to virtual exchange. So this GLE program was recognized in 2019 and again in 2020 with a NAFSA Senator Paul Simon Spotlight Award for Campus Internationalization. Professor Besana has facilitated numerous workshops on institutional approach to virtual exchange globally and is one of the founders of the International Virtual Exchange. So please join me to welcome Professor Besana with the title on Connecting Future Leaders in a Disconnected World at War, the Power of Virtual Exchange. Professor, would you like to unmute? And thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day, good evening, depending on what part of the world you are. A very warm morning to the live audience in Hong Kong. I would like to thank the organizers, my friends at the VE Center at the School of Continuing Education at the Hong Kong Baptist University. I would also like to thank personally the team at the US Embassy in Hong Kong who helped me reconnect with our friends at Hong Kong Baptist. So it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you. And whether you're here in person or virtually, I would like to engage you in a conversation to reflect together on the theme of the summit, which is anchored on three concepts: empowerment, future leaders, and the interconnected world. As you can see in my title, I'm referring to the world as actually disconnected versus the summit theme of an interconnected world. This choice was intentional on my part. We will reflect together on a few paradoxes today, including this paradox of a world that can at the same time appear profoundly interconnected and yet is full of conflicts that reveal deep fractures and a deep inability to connect. My hope is that I will manage to guide us through several apparent paradoxes to then arrive at a very clear call for action for the virtual exchange community. That the world is interconnected, on many different levels is undeniable. I'm here sitting very comfortably in my home in Chicago, and I'm speaking to a global audience. And Chicago is 12,500 kilometers away from Hong Kong. And we all know that the world today operates as a very intricate web of interdependencies where economic supply chain span continents, making a factory shut down in one country ripple through global markets within hours sometimes. And digital networks like the one we're using right now enable instantaneous communication and information flow across borders, while environmental challenges like climate change and pandemics demonstrates how local actions can have planetary consequences very quickly, creating a reality where distant events increasingly shape our daily lives regardless of geographic boundaries. And yet, as interconnected as we are, we've come to this event as individuals. Individuals coming from many different and unique places, geographic places, emotional places, places in each of our personal histories, and most relevant for today's conversation, places rooted in our own personal identities. As we begin this conversation, I want to invite you into a quick moment of personal reflection. This will only take a few seconds, and because this is a webinar, you will not have to share your own results, okay? So please be very comfortable in this little exercise that I'm asking you to do. And I'm sure that many of us have done this exercise before. And if you have, please indulge me and do it again, because none of us are static in our personal development, because life changes each of us constantly. So wherever you are, whether you're in the room, whether you're getting settled right now in Hong Kong, or whether you're anywhere else in the world, make sure you're now in a situation in which you can write something down on paper or on an electronic device. So make sure you have something to write. So I'd like you to take a moment, relax, take a deep breath. When you're ready, I want you to finish this sentence. I am a, don't overthink it. Just write down the first 3 or 4 answers, the 3 or 4 identities that come to mind. Whatever feels natural, whatever feels true or immediate in this moment. These could be roles that you hold, like I'm a parent, I'm a teacher. They could be rooted in your background, like I'm a first-generation college graduate. They could be rooted in your passion. I'm a traveler, I'm a soccer player. They could be rooted in your values. I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist. Obviously, there are no right or wrong answers. The goal here is to notice which parts of ourselves show up first and begin thinking about how these identities shape how we see the world and how the world sees us. I hope by now you have 2 or 3 identities written down in front of you. Did any of your own answers surprise you? Why? Are there any of your answers that you would not be completely comfortable sharing with the rest of the audience today? Again, don't worry, you won't have to share anything. But are there, as you look at your answers, are there any of the answers that you would not be comfortable sharing with the audience, the rest of the audience? Why? And to continue this conversation, I'm going to share my answers. I'm a gay man. I'm an Italian. I'm a mathematician. And I'm a religious agnostic. Did any of my answers surprise you? Did any of my answers offend you? Why? Did any of my answers make you angry or uncomfortable? Why? Do you want to argue with me? And if you do, how hard do you want to argue with me? Look again at your own answers. Is there any of the identities you've listed for which you're ready to fight? And how hard? Suppose that your neighbor, physical or virtual, found one of your identities, one of your answers to the I am question problematic, or worse, completely, deeply unacceptable, and really profoundly despised you for that. How would you react? As humans, we are physically hardwired to associate with other humans that we consider similar. If under threat or attack because of any of our identities, any of us naturally gravitate towards others who share that identity, building a shield of sameness as a protection towards what we perceive as different. We opened this conversation with the juxtaposition of the vastity of the entire interconnected world. We opened this conversation with the juxtaposition of the vastity of the entire connected world with the uniqueness of each of us as individuals. But in the middle, there's this unbelievably complex dimension of grouping on the basis of identity. Many studies in social psychology has shown that the tendency to aggregate around shared characteristics is part of our human nature. Categorization makes survival easier as it reduces the amount of data needed to make quick decisions that in some situations may mean life or death. What I mean is, if I don't have to really get to know you as an individual in all your complexity and multiple identities and intersectionality before deciding if you're dangerous or useful to me, if I can quickly categorize you as a friend or an enemy based on some easily recognized traits, then the chances of my survival are greatly increased. But unfortunately, this evolutionary ability that we have developed can lead to very unpleasant consequences. In 2016, John Powell and Stephen Menendian published a powerful article entitled "The Problem of Othering Towards Inclusiveness and Belonging." The QR code that I hope you see at the bottom right corner of the slide leads you to the accessible article on the web. And in this article, they define the concept of othering as a set of dynamics, processes, and structures that engender marginality and persistent inequality across any of the full range of human differences based on group identities. And then they go on saying that dimensions of othering include, but are not limited to, religion, sex, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, class, disability, sexual orientation, skin tone. So our innate tendency to categorize and associate to foster survival can create marginalization, inequality, and worse, in many cases, open conflict through different level of othering. But the good and scary news at the same time is that there is also plenty of evidence that the characteristics and identities around which we aggregate and around which we categorize others, these processes and structures that Powell and Menendian mention as the roots of otherings, these are not necessarily innate. There is plenty of evidence that suggests that these are social constructs. They are created or shaped by the environment that surrounds us. So categorization, the coalescing in groups, is unavoidable because it's innate, but the definition of the categories and the socialization of these groupings, the creation of the structures of othering, seem to be open for intervention. Every student of social psychology is familiar with the Robbers Cave experiment that was conducted by Musara Sharif in 1954. For the ones like me in this conversation who are not psychologists and may not be familiar with this experiment, let me briefly describe it to you. And many apologies to the psychologists in the audience because I will have to make some unavoidable simplifications. But this Robbers Cave experiment studied intergroup conflict and cooperation among 22 boys at a summer camp in Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma in the United States, as I said, and as written on the slide, in 1954. This experiment had 3 distinct phases. In the first phase, the boys were separated into 2 groups of 11 each, completely arbitrarily, with no rhyme or reason. One was called the Eagles, one was called the Rattlers. And they were allowed to develop very strong group identities independently and without knowledge of one another. But think about it, these group identities were completely artificial and created by, socially constructed by the environment and by the people who were running the experiment, not because they were natural instincts of the boys themselves, but still the groups developed very strong group identities. In the second phase, the groups were introduced to each other through competitive activities. And immediately this created very, very strong conflict between the 2 groups. In the third phase, the researchers tested methods to reduce the hostility, and they introduced cooperative tasks that they called like super-headed tasks that potentially benefited everyone. This study is often criticized for ethical problems, but it's still very telling, I think, particularly for today's conversation. Completely artificial grouping and artificially created identities leveraged the boys' innate instinct to coalesce. The boys who were previously strangers with no inherent differences very rapidly developed intense animosity towards the other group as soon as the competitive activities were introduced. And this demonstrated how quickly and easily intergroup hostility can emerge from nothing more than competition over resources. And the last phase, when goals tasks that require cooperation, promising mutual benefit were introduced, the hostility diminished markedly. For instance, both groups worked together to fix the water supply to the camp or to pull the truck out of the mud. And this finding established that meaningful cooperation towards shared objectives, again, with promise mutual benefit, this, rather than mere proximity, is essential to overcoming intergroup prejudice. So there are three lessons for us from this experiment. The confirmation that categories and structure of othering can be socially constructed, and very often, most often, they are. It is very easy to generate conflict from group-based differences, even artificially created group-based differences. And tasks that require cooperation and benefit everyone can overcome othering. If you're following me, I think you're beginning to see where I'm going with this, working towards the power of virtual exchange and a possible call for action for our community. But stay with me a bit longer. Thinking about the fact that categories and structure of othering can be socially constructed, history, even as recent as today, is full of examples of political leaders taking advantage of this fact. History teaches us how terrible and dangerous the ability and power to shape categorization and create the structure of othering can be. Yet again, neuroscience reveals that we as humans are also wired for connection across these very boundaries through our mirror neuron system, which automatically fire in our brain when we observe other actions and emotions, creating the neurobiological foundation for empathy. These specialized neurons allow us to literally feel what others feel, suggesting that our capacity for understanding and compassion transcends the artificial barriers of group identity. This creates a profound paradox, and the second paradox of the day, where we humans, the same species that builds wall between us and them in kind of an innate way, also possesses the neural architecture to dissolve those walls through genuine emotional resonance, leaving us perpetually caught between our impulse to separate and our deeper ability to connect. But there's a key aspect of this part of the story. It's the fact that although we are neurobiologically ready for empathy, we need to be trained to exercise it. Empathy does not happen automatically. We have the capacity for it. We're given at birth the capacity for empathy, but it doesn't come automatically. Empathy needs to be cultivated. Empathy needs to be nurtured. Empathy needs to be taught is a strong word here. It really needs to be cultivated. And cultivated is the better word. So again, you should start seeing where virtual exchange fits with all of this. So summarizing what we've seen thus far, as humans, we're built with this innate tendency to aggregate and categorize to improve survival. The categorization we make and the groups we identify with are not innate, but socially constructed and lead to conflict and othering. On the other hand, as humans, we have the capacity, the capability to feel empathy for others, but this capability needs to be cultivated as a disruptor, of the categorization context. So let's zoom out for a second at the global level, and let's take stock of what's happening in the world. This is the map of the current armed conflicts around the globe, according to the Council of Foreign Relations. And the QR codes that you see at the bottom left of the slides takes you to the actual page with more information on each conflict that is mapped on the slide. If you click on any of these conflicts, particularly the ones with which you may not be very familiar because they have not been very much in the news, it will not take you long to realize that all of them are rooted, caused, or fed and prolonged by some group-based identities. Group-based identities of some sort. The tragedy under our eyes in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, the war in the Ukraine, the civil war in Sudan, the civil war in Myanmar, the latest confrontation with Iran. In virtually every case, these conflicts are deeply rooted in ethnic, religious, tribal, or sectarian divisions that have been weaponized by political actors. Sudan's civil war is rooted in historical favoritism of Arab and Islamic identity, while ethnicity and conflict are tightly linked in Myanmar, as communal groups take up arms to press grievances for which they found no other recourse. These conflicts demonstrate how constructed categories of difference become deadly realities when combined with competition for resources, political power, territorial control. What makes these identity-based conflicts particularly intractable is how they transform political or economic grievances into seemingly existential struggles between us and them through intentionally designed processes of profound othering. The categories that divide these societies, whether Sunni versus Shia in Yemen, Buddhist versus Muslim in Myanmar, Arab versus non-Arab in Sudan, become the organizing principles around which violence is justified and sustained. Nearly 90% of Myanmar is Buddhist, and most are members of the majority ethnic communities. Yet, this religious and ethnic majority has been mobilized against minority communities in a way that almost echoes the artificial group formation that we saw in the Robbers Cave experiment. The tragic irony is that these conflicts often originate from legitimate grievances about resource distribution, political representation, historical injustices, but become trapped in cycles of violence where the original issues are overshadowed by the imperative to defend one's group identity against perceived threats from the other. In the same article I mentioned earlier, Powell and Menendian wrote, "The problem of the 21st century is the problem of othering. In a world beset by seemingly intractable and overwhelming challenges, virtually every global, national, and regional conflict is wrapped within or organized around one or more dimension of group-based difference. So somewhere, at a certain point in history, someone managed to build group affinities and categorization so strong and so powerful to be able to motivate entire sectors of populations to fight and die. Here we see the fragility of our world that can so easily become disconnected and plunge into war. The daily bombardment of images showcasing our interconnected world, from global supply chains to viral social media trends, creates a compelling narrative of universal connectivity that masks a much more troubling and complex reality. While we celebrate how a video filmed in one corner of the world can reach billions within hours, or how economic decisions in distant capitals affect markets globally, This technological and economic integration has paradoxically coincided with an era of profound social fragmentation. The same digital networks that theoretically bring us together have become echo chambers that reinforce group identities and amplify divisions, that sort of encrusts othering, while the economic interdependence we prize has often intensified competition for resources and created new forms of inequality that map onto existing ethnic, religious, and tribal, sectarian lines. The stark contrast between these two realities reveals the superficial nature of much of our celebrated interconnectedness. Myanmar military can commit genocide against the Rohingya while the world watches through smartphones and social media. Yet, this awareness translates into little meaningful intervention. Syrian refugees have flown a civil war they played out in real time across global news networks. But the very countries consuming this content often responded by strengthening borders rather than opening them. The bitter irony is that our interconnected world has made us more aware of distant suffering while simultaneously making us feel more powerless to address it, creating a kind of almost voyeuristic connectivity that substitutes emotional engagement for meaningful action. This suggests that true human connection requires more than technological links or economic ties. It demands the kind of sustained, empathetic engagement that can transcend the group-based identities that continue to fracture our supposedly unified and interconnected global community. Again, in the words of Powell and Menendian, we must support the creation of structures of inclusion that recognize and accommodate difference rather than seek to erase it. We need practices that create voice without denying our deep interrelationship. And more than that, reconnecting with the summit theme and the previous points of this conversation, if you follow me, if you've been with me, we must educate future leaders to fully exercise and grow their neurobiological ability for empathy. We must educate future leaders to recognize the moments and situations in which socially constructed structures of othering are created. We must educate future leaders to intervene to create structures of inclusion and belonging to replace structures of othering. We must educate future leaders to recognize and exercise the power of collaborative tasks that transcends conflict and engage group differences for the common good. And in order to be educated to empathy, to be educated to recognize structure of othering, to create structures of belonging, and to be educated to recognize the power of collaborative tasks to overcome conflict, future leaders cannot just be told about all of these necessary components, as I'm doing right now to you, I'm just telling you, right? But future leaders need to be intentionally put in concrete situations in which they can experience all of this, in which they have to navigate real group-based differences and real externally constructed categorization that they themselves may have internalized, in which they have to be careful not to create new structure of othering as they react to the situation and the context and the people, and in which they get to work concretely on collaborative projects so that conflicts can be resolved and group-based differences can be put to productive use. And we all know that intentionally designing experiences with all these features require exposing future leaders to peers from geographic locations and cultural backgrounds that would be incredibly complicated to do in person through traditional physical mobility. The interconnectedness of the world through technology here plays a positive role, allowing us to create experiences that would be impossible to realize with traditional physical mobility. Technology transcends mobility not as a second-class experience, but as an asset to create powerful experiences that would not be possible otherwise. So finally, we have arrived to the moment in which we celebrate the power of virtual exchange emerging so clearly from today's conversation, if you stayed with me. We need to educate future leaders to grow their own capacity for empathy. Well, most virtual exchange projects intentionally address the development of empathy. Think, for example, in the COIL version of virtual exchange, the intentional design of the first phase of the projects that is explicitly aiming at empathy building. We need to educate future leaders to recognize structures of othering and create structures of belonging. Many virtual exchange projects are built around exactly this, guiding students to confront their own internalized structure of othering. Among many, think of the work that Celia has been doing, for example, but also thousands of COIL virtual exchange projects run with future leaders from radically different cultural frameworks. We need to educate future leaders to recognize and leverage the power of collaborative tasks. Here is where the COIL flavor of virtual exchange shines. As the heart of VCOIL are collaborative projects with concrete deliverables, so that the mixed groups of students need to overcome all the challenges that may have led to conflict in order to achieve a shared goal. Does virtual exchange really do all of this? Is virtual exchange really effective? Does it really work in doing all these beautiful, marvelous things that we've been discussing? There's ample literature out there on the impact of various forms of virtual exchange, all the things that we've been talking about. Check out the Journal of Virtual Exchange, published by Uni Collaboration in Europe. They also run special editions for the International Virtual Exchange Consortium Conference, which, by the way, is coming up in October in Heraklion in Greece. I strongly encourage you to attend if you can. You can attend virtually as well. There's a special edition of the Journal of International Students on virtual exchange, but there's like hundreds and hundreds of articles and series of articles with good data to show that virtual exchange actually works. In the next few minutes, I don't want to run over time. I would like to leave a couple of minutes at least for comments or questions. I'm going to show you some data collected by my team at DePaul that goes in the same direction of showing that yes, virtual exchange does work. Yes, virtual exchange does all the wonderful things that we say it does. As our colleague from Hong Kong practice at the beginning mentioned, at DePaul, we run a version of virtual exchange COIL that we call the Global Learning Experience program that was launched in 2013. And through which we have implemented about 300 projects with partners in more than 40 countries around the world. I'm going to skip this slide. We do assessment with an instrument that is distributed to students at the end of every project. It consists of 13 topical questions, 4 summative questions, 3 open-ended questions. And the 13 topical questions are statements on a 5 points or Likert scale. I'm going to go light fast to the next few slides because I just want you to see the data. Here are the questions, the statements the students react to related to virtual global collaboration skills that connect to all that we've been talking about today. Greater ability to interact effectively with people from different cultures, international team building skills, virtual collaboration skills, deeper understanding of other people's lives and works expectations. That's in the empathy area. my ability to communicate with people from other linguistic and cultural backgrounds, confidence about working in a setting that requires global collaboration. This speaks to the last part of the conversation about collaborative tasks. How do students react to this? We have data from 374 students in 41 courses across 5 academic terms. Here are the disciplines of all these courses. You can see like it's a broad disciplinary spectrum. And here what the students say. Did they increase their ability to interact effectively with different culture? Yes, over 80% says agree, strongly agree. Did they increase their team building skills? Yes, over 80% says strongly agree. Did they increase their ability to collaborate virtually? Yes, again, close to 80% agree or strongly disagree. Did they develop a better understanding of work expectation from people of different culture? Yes, almost 80% again. Did they increase their ability for intercultural communication? Yes, strong yes. Did they increase their confidence in global collaboration or working in settings that require global collaboration? Yes. So, what do I want you to take away from today? As human, we are built to coalesce around group-based differences, and this can lead to othering. But the parameters for the creation of groups are social constructs. Those are not innate, they're not given. We are also built for empathy, but this capacity needs to be cultivated. These dynamics underlie most conflicts in the world today, at every level, from local to global. And overarching collaborative tasks can help in overcoming conflicts based on socially constructed differences. And so virtual exchange in its many forms is a tremendously powerful tool to educate future leaders, to grow their capacity for empathy, recognize structure of othering, create structure of belonging, and recognize and implement and leverage the role of collaborative tasks. Although I'm speaking to you today from a country where lately empathy has become almost an insult, and where group-based differences are weaponized in cruel and destructive ways, I still have hope and faith. And I know that this community can continue to make a huge difference in the world. It is our responsibility to connect future leaders in a disconnected world at war, because we have the power of virtual exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Besana. Yes. We are deeply impressed with the harmony. And so, yes, thank you so much, Professor Besana. Thank you. Your address on the cultivating their empathy, not with training, that is critical. Thank you so much. And to start the floor, I understand there are some in the chat box that I would like to key in and see a lot of thank you note, and especially, let's say I start with the first one. Yes, I noticed participant, Dr. Dick Eugenio. Okay, he is asking, say, when he did his master, he moved to a dorm and that was previously occupied by females. And he removed, what happened is, he removed all the remaining wall decors, except a poster of a dog and a cat embracing each other. He found that with the caption, and then it was very different. And they have so much to share, and the power of realization about the significance of the other staying with him. And he found that is helpful. Would you like to give a comment to address his feedback?
I think I think it comments itself, right? I mean, the dog and cat here are symbolized the different groups based on group difference, right? Around which we call us. But still, there's the possibility of empathy and there's the possibility of working together for a collaborative task that will help us remove conflict. I don't know what the dog and cat were working towards, most likely food, I would assume. Sometimes the common good shared collaborative task don't need to be extraordinarily complicated. They can be really simple to help us reconnect with our ability for empathy to destroy structure of others. So yeah, nice comment.
Yes,
Any
yes,
other
and I can
any
resonate on that.
I would welcome any other comment or questions, you know.
Right, right. I think the vibes in the physical environment as well as the living environment that really help us to reconnect if there is at war outside. But globally, when we reconnect, I also like the part that you share with us about the global conflict tracker. This is something that we need to look at the social impact because if we watch the global news, then that is something that even though it's far, but it could be close to our heart when we see this again and again. So thank you for sharing that global conflict tracker. And it's very nice that you have the QR code, so it's ready for people to do it quickly. I also have on the floor, I grabbed one of the paper that they are saying that the group-based differences that you have mentioned. And in fact, in a lot of the people's group, to act with the adult manner, we do encourage people that try to have the civility, not to keep on having those kind of cursive words, but try to be constructive. They are saying that in Cantonese, we have a word, 和而不同, 和而不同. That means that is still have the diversity, but we are trying to respect with the harmony, or at least getting addressed the humility that we have. And for the time, I also noticed there's another Q&A coming up.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a question in the
anonymous
Q&A.
attendee.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
read
going
it
to read
out.
the question for everybody. Yeah.
Sure.
Earlier you said the categorization other is somewhat a part of our social nature, and that virtually every conflict that currently or previously exists in the world is more or less connected to this phenomenon. Then is there a way to utilize the same phenomenon to de-weaponize these identities to achieve peace? Or peace is virtually impossible to achieve due to these categories and differences? Excellent question. Peace is very, very difficult to achieve, but we have examples of situations in which people still respecting and honoring their own affiliations to their own groups when they're not necessarily completely socially externally constructed, but they have a root in the individual. We have example situation in which people still honoring these differences can have an honest dialogue about what the problems are on the table and trying to find collective solutions. If you're not familiar with the parents circle, I would encourage you to Google it and look it up. This is a group of parents, both Palestinian and Israeli, who over the years have lost children to that endless series of wars and conflicts. These are people who are deeply rooted in their own religious and ethnic group identity, but still can get into a room and they can have a conversation and they can exercise their empathy towards the other. In this case, unfortunately, based on common grief and having gone through and experiencing profound, like really destroying grief of losing a child or a family member. but they can have a conversation and they can together start implementing measures for educating the next generation in to be able to, again, I'm repeating myself, but that's a key, to respect the difference without having to kill one another, finding a way. And you know, our colleague from Ankarbati used the concept of harmony, which is a lovely concept, right? It's when empathy leaves the individual and rises up to a more social dimension and creating harmony. So I'm not saying that, oh, you know, kumbaya, let's make peace in the world tomorrow. I'm saying we have the tool, we know that we have the tools. It's difficult, it's hard work. And if you're virtual exchange practitioner, you know that it's hard work, right? But it's work that really works, that changes people. And it can make the world a better place. I don't just believe it, I see it when our students participate in projects like this. We have another, do I have time for the other question?
Probably we will encourage folks to send us the feedback so that we can send and revert to you. And thank you. As the usual way, we want to applaud for your keynote speech. So for the participants, please take a break and we'll come back at Hong Kong time and within 9:40, Hong Kong time, local time, 9:40. Again, thank you so much. Good evening. So here's the feedback form for our participants to join. And thank you once again for all your active participation. See you around, Professor Besana. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.